Hello and welcome once again to the video. Continuing with this one, continuing my look at the 2023 Formula One World Championship. As usual, what I will do is firstly try and take a little fat pen. It's always a bit tricky. What I do is I list the finishing order of all 20 drivers on the side. In the middle here, I list the top 10 in the Drivers' Championship, and then I do a rundown of the 10 places in the Constructors' Championship. And then I just spend a short while just giving my thoughts of the race, basically. So this was round 9. Supposed to be round 10, of course, but Imola was cancelled. Austria. Okay, so let's go. Top 20 positions first. Okay, so we have Verstappen, Perez, Okay, so there we have it. Now, I haven't given the race positions the results of the sprint race, as some might remember me saying in the past. I'm not a fan of the sprint race. I would rather have it than not have it. I would rather have sprint qualifying and sprint race instead of practice sessions. Definitely, why not? But what I would prefer is that instead of a sprint race, they just added those laps to a Grand Prix. They wouldn't be able to add, like for instance here, what was the main race? The main race was, how many laps was it? About 70 laps. You wouldn't be able to add another 24 laps, I think, from the sprint race to it. I don't think the drivers would be able to cope with that. But you could at least add another 10 laps, maybe 15. That would be tricky in places like Singapore, Azerbaijan, but add some laps anyway. I'd prefer that to a sprint race. Also, it sort of muddies the water over who is a Grand Prix winner and who isn't. I don't think it's happened yet where someone who has never won a Grand Prix has won a sprint race. I don't think that dilemma has happened yet with the statistics, but it will do eventually. And, you know, how will that work, I wonder? Will that person be classed as a Grand Prix winner? Who knows? But at least this year they have sorted out the problem with the sprint race for some reason being qualifying for the Grand Prix. So, you know, it's ridiculous that whoever was fastest in qualifying was just on pole for the sprint race, and whoever won the sprint race was then the actual person that was on pole for the Grand Prix and not the person that was fastest in qualifying. That happened a few times, and most notably the British Grand Prix 2021. Hamilton quickest in qualifying, but Verstappen started on pole for the Grand Prix because he won the sprint race. They've done away with that this year, so that's good. You've got a separate qualifying session for the Grand Prix and the sprint. But anyway, yeah, I actually enjoyed the sprint race immensely. It was a fantastic race. I almost forgot that I don't like sprint races. So yeah, it was quite an exciting race. I mean, it was still an easy win for Verstappen, but there was a lot of argy-bargy. Hülkenberg was doing very well until his tyres started to give out. Hamilton was coming through from the back of the field. Lots of overtaking manoeuvres. I heard it mentioned that there was something like 23 or something overtake manoeuvres, successful overtakes. So yeah, aided of course by the inclement weather, but yeah, it was very exciting, I thought. But you see, they're too short. Sprint races are too short. Maybe have a completely separate Grand Prix. So you have a full race, a full-length Grand Prix on Saturday and Sunday. That would be tough, wouldn't it? But I just think the sprint races, they're a little bit Mickey Mouse, doing the same number of laps that the F2 drivers do, basically. And I just think that's a bit, you know, not necessary. Just chuck 10 laps extra onto each Grand Prix. Okay, so, oh yeah, and of course the other thing about the sprint race was how unfortunate it was for Norris. I've got to mention my predictions as well, of course, in a moment. But yeah, Norris had a bad, on that, was it, get it out in a moment, was it turn 3 on that first lap? The two Red Bulls sort of went wide a little bit. Verstappen and Perez were fighting, and if only Norris had been able to turn his car, instead he sort of understeered. Norris understeered just like the two Red Bulls, and so he understeered sort of into them basically, which meant he had to slam the brakes on. And he lost loads of places. Had he been able to turn on the inside of those two Red Bulls, then Norris would have had the lead basically after 3 corners. He wouldn't have held it, of course. Verstappen would have got past him, but maybe he would have finished second or third. Instead, I think he was 9th, just outside the points. But anyway, so that was unfortunate for Norris, but he made up for it in the main race, in the Grand Prix. But my predictions, yeah, my predictions were spectacularly wrong, which I think is actually quite an achievement, to virtually nearly get every single driver. I got every single driver. I got 9, basically. 9 of the 10 drivers that finished in the top 10 I got in my prediction. The only one I didn't get was Ocon, who I thought would be in the top 10, and he wasn't. So I got 9 out of 10, but amazingly, and I think it takes a lot of skill to do this, I managed to get every single one of those, apart from Verstappen, of course, in the wrong order. I predicted Hamilton would be 2nd, and he was 8th, Alonso 3rd, and he was 5th, Perez 4th, and he was 3rd, Russell 5th, and he was 7th, Stroll 6th, and he was 9th, Sainz 7th, and he was 6th, Leclerc 8th, and he was 2nd, and I did, oh no, I got that wrong as well, didn't I? Norris 10th, and he was 4th. So amazingly, that's 8 drivers there that of those that I predicted in the top 10 were in the top 10, but all in different positions. It's incredible. Quite an achievement, that, I think. I was taken by surprise by McLaren's. I didn't know they were going to have upgrades and in Austria, basically. I later found out that they were going to have them in Silverstone, but they pushed them forward. So that's why I didn't know, and I suppose no one knew that they were going to have them in Austria. So I think without those upgrades, I reckon Norris would have been 10th, as I predicted. But no, he was 4th, so it's fantastic. It's very exciting for McLaren. Although they're already saying that they don't think they'll be as fast at Silverstone. Is that them just trying to play down their chances, not allow everyone to be too excited, or do they feel that their upgrades are not going to work very well on a faster track like Silverstone? To be honest, they're not very good upgrades if that's the case. If as soon as you're on a faster track, suddenly you're going to be rubbish. I think they're just playing down expectations. Norris 4th in the end after Sainz got penalised again for track limits after the race, as Hamilton was as well, which meant that he swapped positions with Russell. But the main Grand Prix was, keep trying to keep this in focus, I think it is in focus. It was an exciting race. I still liked it, but it was amazing how everything turned around. You had Ferrari and McLaren doing really well, better than Mercedes and Aston Martin, which was a real turnaround this year. I don't know why Ferrari are so good. I don't think Ferrari know why Ferrari were so good either. We know about Norris, which is good. Piastri was miles down, of course, 16th place. But in a way, I think that's good, because it shows, I mean, Norris has tended to outperform Piastri anyway, but for there to be as big a gap as there was between the two of them, that should be seen as a positive, because it shows that the upgrades were really good. Verstappen way out front. He had a challenge from Leclerc right at the beginning, didn't he? But as soon as that was slapped down, that was it, and he was on his way to his 42nd win. That puts him just 9 behind Alain Prost. He also got the fastest lap, of course, right at the end. The funny thing about the fastest lap, well, it's not funny, so I always find it a little bit irritating. You may know how I tend to be irritated by virtually everything Christian Horner says. Not Max. I don't have a problem with Max, but I do have a problem with Christian Horner and the total nonsense he comes out with. I'm not just talking about 2021 when he backed Max Massey, basically, Michael Massey, and said that Michael Massey did no wrong. It's not just that. It's all the time. Today he said no risk, no fun, when he was queried about why Verstappen went for the fastest lap, had a pit stop right at the end, which just brought him out 2 or 3 seconds ahead of Leclerc. If he had had any delay in the pits, he would have lost the lead to Leclerc. And with only 1 or 2 laps left, there's no guarantee he would have got that back. So yes, there was a risk. The only thing they were risking, though, was the chance to win every single race this year. And, of course, risking the actual win in this Grand Prix. They were not risking anything championship-wise. So for Horner to say no risk, no fun, he wouldn't be saying that if Verstappen was 5 points ahead of Leclerc in the championship instead of, having the massive lead that he has. He would certainly not be talking about fun then, would he? No risk, no fun then. So, yes, there was risk, but very minimal when you're in such control of both championships. I would be impressed if Christian Horner had done that if there was just a few seconds, a few points, and it was between Verstappen and Leclerc, and there was a real ding-dong in the championship. Then I would be impressed with that. But as it stands, no, I'm not. Perez had another nightmare. He had a nightmare in the sprint race, didn't he, where he was way down the field. He came charging through in the sprint race, which was very good. But a very lackluster performance again by Perez. He's just not... he's just getting completely blown away now, as I thought would happen. But I was hoping it wouldn't, basically. So these Ferraris, very surprising how competitive they are. Now, of course, one of my other predictions was that I thought Sainz would finish ahead of Leclerc, because I said in my predictions video that I believed Leclerc had lost his mojo a little bit and didn't seem to care anymore. That's how he came across. Whereas Sainz, his eyes are out on stalks on all these interviews, and he's super adrenaline pumping, fired up, ready for confrontation and ready to attack the track and any drivers on the track. And he just seems really on it at the moment, and Leclerc doesn't. But in this race, Leclerc, okay, Sainz was up behind Leclerc early on, but of course he would have had DRS. So, so yes, I still think Sainz was the quicker driver of the two in the race, because yes, Sainz did have DRS behind Leclerc, enabling him to stay close, but why didn't Leclerc pull away? I think Leclerc would have pulled away this time last year, say for instance, he would have pulled away. So I do think that Sainz is driving better than Leclerc at the moment. Sainz was crippled by having to double stack in the pits. They could have just kept Sainz out one more lap, but then again the safety car may well have ended then, so in order to get it in before the virtual safety car ended, they had to double stack, and that cost Sainz a number of seconds, of course. It cost Stroll a lot more. Did I put one L for Stroll? Oh my goodness, it's 2 L's, isn't it, for Stroll? Sorry about that. So basically, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Stroll, he had to double stack as well behind Alonso, and the safety car, virtual safety car, ended as he was in the pit lane, basically. So everyone suddenly speeded up on the track, and so Stroll lost a load of places. Bit frustrating for him, because I don't even know why they brought Alonso in. He was on hard tyres. And they could have brought him in the lap previous. If you look at the onboard footage, it looked like Alonso was going to come into the pits on the lap prior to the one he came in, just in front of Stroll. But then he seemed to change his mind at the last minute, or the team changed their mind. But anyway, so Stroll and Sainz lost out through those pit stops. Track limits. That's crazy, the track limits. I don't see what the problem is in going beyond the white line. All you've got to do is make the track on the outside a little bit more difficult, a little bit slower. Make it a material that's a bit slower. than the track, and then people won't go out there so much. But to penalise people all the time when it's very difficult for them to see where they're going, I just think that's crazy. You don't want to see tons of 5-second penalties all over the place. I mean, Hamilton ended up with 15 seconds in total, I think. Tsunoda as well. Sainz, 10 or 15 seconds. And there were loads of cars with 5 seconds, loads of cars with warnings. Only Russell and I think one other driver didn't have any warnings at all. I don't see... The commentators get really worked up, especially Martin Brundle, about track limits, about how you should stay on the track. I think it should be an option. I think drivers should be allowed to go off the track as much as they like. They can drive to the local shops if they want, but they'll just lose loads of time. I think they should be allowed to do that, but just have the penalty of being on a slower surface. The problem is these runoff areas are often the same sort of surface as the track, so they're not losing any time by drifting into those runoff areas. But I don't think they should make them bring back the sausage curbs either, which breaks cars. I don't think you should have your car broken just because you've gone off the track. So have a surface there that's just slower, basically. They surely must be able to design something if they don't want to just chuck grass down there, because maybe they think that's too slippery and you might dig into the grass and then have an accident. They have to make it safe, but just make it slower or a bit damaging to the tyres in some way. And then we won't have all these constant penalties. Anyway, it does frustrate me because I just think drivers should be allowed to do whatever they like, but just make it slower outside the track. Aston Martins, we don't really know why they were particularly slow, but I mean, Norris, looking at this, Norris comfortably beat the Aston Martins and the Mercedes, comfortably beat them. As I say, McLaren are playing down their chances at Silverstone, but that's incredible. If they have, with just some mid-season upgrades, if they have managed to leapfrog Aston Martin and Mercedes and other teams as well, because McLaren were doing pretty bad up to that point, then I think that's amazing. The best battle, what was the best battle? I would say it was Sainz versus Perez, wasn't it, towards the end? Sainz holding off Perez, that was great. Good side-by-side action. Sainz did really well fighting Perez there. He did for some reason say that Perez was intimidating him, as Ted Kravitz suggested after the race. Maybe that's just lost in translation, because of course that's what the car behind is supposed to do. They are supposed to intimidate you. Yes, on normal roads, you don't want someone close up behind you is intimidating you, but not in a motor race. That's what they're supposed to do. That's what you're supposed to do. Get up behind someone very close and then try to overtake. So lost in translation, I think that was. This was Mercedes' worst. How many points did they win? They just got 11 points, didn't they? But it's their worst point haul all season, despite there being 2 races. That's incredible. It's only the second sprint race weekend this year. And Mercedes scored only 11 points, which is their lowest point haul all year. Whereas McLaren equalled their best point haul all year with 12 points. And Red Bull were just 1 point off their best point haul. They scored 56. I think their best was 57, was it, in Azerbaijan? And even Haas, all they did was score 3 points with Hülkenberg in the sprint race, that great drive he did. Those 3 points were enough to lift Haas up to 7th place, though, ahead of Alfa Romeo. So I think that's very good. Stroll, yeah, why were the Mercedes so slow? We don't know why the Mercedes were so slow in this race. Toto Wolff doesn't know either. It's a bit worrying. Gasly and Ocon, where were they today? Well, Ocon had a 5-second penalty due to an unsafe release, I believe, and then when he came out, he was stuck behind Albon in the fast in a straight line Williams, and that held up him massively. Sargent did a good race. He was quite competitive. At times he was running in the points. So it's a good race by Sargent. Joe, what really happened? Oh, Joe had 3 pit stops. So I'm surprised he's as high as 12th with 3 pit stops, because they didn't plan for 3 pit stops, but he had a problem with a tear off on his visor going into his air intake or something, and that's why he had to have the first pit stop so early. Albon, yeah, and once again, you see the Williams just finishing just outside the points, so either just inside or just outside, more often than not just outside. Bottas had a problem with his car as well, damaged front wing, which he drove with the whole race. They didn't replace it because they probably thought, well, he's not going to score points. We don't want to waste a front wing, I guess. De Vries, well, yeah, he finished ahead of Tsunoda, but only because Tsunoda had a terrible time at the start. He was all over the place. His onboard footage was like watching sort of my onboard footage sometimes when I'm playing PC F1. And you go up the inside on the first corner, and then you suddenly realise you're going to get squeezed by all the cars that are turning into the corner. And that happened to him. And I think a couple of corners later, he then outbraked himself and went miles wide again. He had a terrible time, and then he had 3 5-second penalties. So yes, De Vries finished ahead of Tsunoda, but don't give him a trophy for that. I'll be surprised if we see De Vries in Formula 1 next year. He's already getting a bit of grief from the likes of Helmut Marko. So I don't know why it hasn't worked for him, because he came into the Italian Grand Prix, didn't he, at Williams last year and finished 9th. Drove a fantastic race. This year he's just been invisible. Maybe it's down to the car. Don't know. But De Vries is certainly not doing that much. Magnussen, Hulkenberg was, I think Hulkenberg was the only retirement, wasn't he? Retired early on with a blown engine. Magnussen didn't really do much. It's very disappointing for Haas. I really want, I sort of feel for Gunther Steiner, as I think everybody does. I just want him to have a good Grand Prix. He had a good sprint race with Hulkenberg finishing 6th, but I want him to have a good actual Grand Prix, So, championship-wise, it's all going on over here, isn't it? Aston Martin and Mercedes. Now, Mercedes lost a couple of points from... Actually, no, they didn't, because Russell and Hamilton just swapped positions when Hamilton got penalised after the race. Russell and Hamilton just swapped places, so Mercedes didn't actually lose any points, but Aston Martin had put in what do you call it? What's the word for it? Anyway, they had put in a thing, I can't think of the word for it at the moment, after the race, and maybe it was to do with the track limits, we think, and whether or not all track limits had been accounted for. They obviously thought that Aston Martin were not going to get any, they themselves were not going to get any extra penalties, but it may well be that Aston Martin's protest, that's the word I'm looking for, so scratch the word thing and put protest in there instead. Aston Martin's protest may well have been the result, or may well have caused Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton to lose a couple of places, and also Sainz to lose a couple of places. So it made no difference to Mercedes' points that they scored in the championship, but it did put Alonso ahead of Sainz. So it gave Aston Martin a couple more points. So that's helped them in their battle with Mercedes. Ferrari coming back into it, that's great. McLaren, come on McLaren, 29 points. I'm really excited about Silverstone with, despite what McLaren is saying, I'm really excited to see what both drivers can do, both Lando and Oscar. But particularly Lando, because I've been following him in lower Formula before he came into Formula 1. And he's British as well, so I'm very patriotic. So I'm very much going to be cheering on Lando Norris at Silverstone. And he's now in the top 10 in the championship. He's pushed out Gasly from top 10. Leclerc is ahead of Russell, just on virtue of having had a 2nd place. Hamilton had his worst points haul for a long time, with just 4 points. despite there being 2 races. But there you go, another crushing win for Verstappen. That's his 7th win this year out of 9 races, and his 5th on the trot. Incredible stuff. So, Silverstone next week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to subscribe, please do so, or comment or like the video. Anything like that is always most welcome. And I'll see you on the next video, whatever that may be about. So, until then, goodbye. See you next time.